The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the rotting wood of the abandoned Miller property, like heavy metal nails driving into a coffin. Inside, the air tasted of copper, wet fur, and 40 years of undisturbed dust. Finn adjusted the strap of his heavy-duty camera bag, his breath pluming in the damp, freezing air. Are we sure this is the place? Urbex forums are one thing, but this looks like a federal crime scene before we even step inside. That is literally the point, Finn, Ash laughed, sweeping a beam of a high-lumens flashlight across a peeling, pastel yellow wallpaper, splattered with dark, unidentifiable stains. Ash loved the rush. He lived for the subscriber count and the midnight adrenaline. The local lore says Dingus the Clown hung himself in the rafters after the 1984 incident. If we catch even a flicker of EVP, the new channel video is hitting 1 million views by Tuesday. Henry stayed near the back, his hands shoved deep into his oversized hoodie. He hadn't wanted to come. Amelia had practically dragged him out of the car, and now she was busy setting up the secondary tripod near a rotting archway that led into what used to be a children's party room. "Look at this floor," Amelia muttered, shining her light downward. The linoleum was warped, bubbled, and stained with erratic dark rings. "What spilled here?" "Or who spilled here?" Selina whispered. She stood silently by the broken bay window, her arms crossed tight against her chest. Selina was the sensible one, but even she had agreed to come because the snowstorm outside made driving back down the mountain highway impossible. They were stuck here until dawn. They all jumped as a sudden metallic clatter echoed from the upper floor. It sounded like a heavy iron spring snapping under immense pressure. "Okay." Finn swallowed hard, his knuckles white around his camera rig. That wasn't the wind. They ascended the rotting staircase one by one, the wood groaning in agonizing protest beneath their boots. The second floor was a labyrinth of claustrophobic corridors, wallpaper peeling away in long, wet strips like dead skin. At the end of the central hallway sat a room with a reinforced wooden door, locked by a heavy rusted padlock that had somehow been smashed open from the inside. "No way," Ash breathed, pushing the door open with 2 fingers. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dark to reveal a macabre shrine. The walls were entirely covered in crude, frantic paintings of a single grinning face, a bulbous red nose, hyperextended triangular eyes, and a mouth stretched into a grotesque, ear-to-ear smile painted in what looked unmistakably like dried human blood. In the center of the room sat a massive old-fashioned wooden trunk, banded in black iron. "Guys, smell that," Selina gagged, covering her nose with her sleeve. It was a suffocating, sickening stench, not just mildew and dust, but the heavy, putrid tang of rancid meat, cheap grease paint, and sweet cloying sugar gone foul. Before anyone could stop him, Ash walked over to the iron-banded trunk. "Content, baby," he grinned, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. He unlatched the heavy clasp and threw the lid back. Inside lay a costume, a jester's outfit made of violently bright, mismatched fabrics, yellow polka dots, blood-red stripes, and oversized clown shoes curled up at the toes like waking spikes. Resting atop the costume was a mask made of cracked yellowed porcelain, painted with a permanent, sickening smirk. "Don't touch that, Ash," Henry warned, taking a step backward. "Seriously, I have a really bad feeling about this." "Relax, pessimist." Ash laughed nervously. He reached out and picked up the porcelain mask. As his fingers brushed the ceramic surface, a sharp, metallic click echoed from deep within the empty eye sockets. Ash gasped, dropping the mask as if it had burned him. But it didn't hit the floor. Instead, Ash's body stiffened violently, his back arching into an unnatural, impossible C-shape. A sound ripped from his throat, not a human scream, but a high-pitched mechanical honk that vibrated in everyone's teeth. "Ash!" Amelia shrieked, running forward. Ash's head snapped toward her with bone-crunching velocity. his jaw unhinged downward with a wet tearing sound, stretching past any biological limit. Saliva, thick and yellow, roped from his teeth as his eyes rolled back completely into his head, leaving only bruised, yellowed whites. "Hello, boys and girls," Ash spoke, but the voice wasn't his. It was a multi-layered, nightmarish cacophony, dozens of children laughing and screaming simultaneously, layered over a deep, gravelly baritone. "Dingus is home." Finn dropped his camera, the lens shattering against the floorboards as Ash lunged. He didn't run like a man. He moved with joint-snapping jerks, his limbs bending backward as he tackled Henry to the ground. Before Henry could even draw breath to scream, Ash's hands, now tipped with thick, yellowed fingernails sharpened to jagged points, slammed down onto Henry's chest. With a sickening squelch, Ash drove his bare hands straight through Henry's sternum, cracking the ribs outward like a ribcage-shaped blossom. Henry let out a wet, gurgling gasp, blood flooding his lips as his eyes locked onto Amelia in desperate terror. "Look at the funny man," Ash cackled, his voice pitched up into a manic falsetto. He plunged his forearm deeper into Henry's chest cavity, rummaging around with wet tearing sounds before ripping his hand back out. In his fist, he gripped Henry's still-beating heart, wet and glistening in the flashlight beam. "Henry!" Selina screamed, her voice cracking into raw agony. Finn scrambled backward on his hands and knees, weeping openly. "What is he? Oh God, what is he?" Amelia was paralyzed, her shoes stuck in a pool of fresh, hot blood spreading across the floorboards. Ash tossed Henry's heart aside like a piece of garbage, his head twitching violently to the side with a loud crack. His body began to distend and swell. The fabric of his jacket ripped apart as his torso expanded, joints popping and dislocating as he transformed into something far larger, far more monstrous. The entity known as Dingus the Clown was breaking out of Ash's human vessel. "Time for the grand finale," Dingus screeched, turning his mutilated, stretching face toward Amelia and Selina. "Run! Run out of the house!" Selina grabbed Amelia by the jacket collar, dragging her backward down the corridor. Behind them, heavy, thundering footsteps echoed. Thump, thump, honk, the sound of oversized clown shoes hitting the wood with terrifying velocity. They reached the staircase, but as Amelia threw herself toward the steps, a heavy wooden beam, dislodged by the supernatural tremors shaking the house, crashed down across the landing, sealing off the exit. "The window! Through the guest room!" Selina yelled, pulling Amelia into a side bedroom. They slammed the door behind them and jammed a heavy oak dresser against the frame. But it was useless. A second later, a massive, oversized fist punched straight through the solid oak door like it was made of balsa wood. Splinters exploded everywhere, slicing into Amelia's arms and face. The hand withdrew, and the door was kicked off its hinges with a thunderous crash. There stood Dingus. He stood nearly 7 feet tall now. Ash's body horribly stretched and bloated, fused into a grotesque patchwork of torn human flesh and vibrant, greasy clown attire. The porcelain mask had melted directly into Ash's face, blending ceramic and skin into a permanent, weeping red and white grin. A thick, razor-sharp party blower hung from where a mouth should be, unspooling outward with a wet, whistling hiss whenever he exhaled. "Don't leave the party early," Dingus mocked, his voice shifting between a terrifying child's giggle and a growl of absolute malice. Selina backed up against the broken glass of the window, pulling a heavy metal tripod leg she had snatched from the hallway. "Stay back, you sick freak." "A juggler," Dingus clapped his massive, blood-drenched gloves together. "Let's see how many pieces I can keep in the air." With terrifying speed, Dingus lunged. Selina swung the metal pipe with all her might, striking the creature square in the side of the head. The metal bent on impact, but Dingus didn't even flinch. Instead, he grabbed Selina by the throat with one hand, lifting her effortlessly off the floor. "Selina!" Amelia screamed. Dingus smiled wider, the porcelain cracking further, revealing rows of tiny, needle-sharp human teeth lining his gums. With a casual twist of his wrist, he severed Selina's head from her shoulders with a sickening pop and a fountain of dark arterial spray that painted the walls in crimson arcs. He dropped her limp body to the floor like a discarded toy and turned his hollow, staring eyes toward Amelia. Amelia backed into the corner of the room, her back pressed against the freezing glass of the window. Her clothes were soaked in blood, her hands trembling so hard she could barely breathe. Finn crawled into the room, behind Dingus, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, clutching a heavy metal fireplace poker he had found downstairs. Driven by sheer, unadulterated survival instinct, Finn lunged forward and brought the poker down hard across the back of Dingus's knee. The joint shattered with a wet crunch. Dingus shrieked, a high-pitched, feedback loop sound that shattered every remaining window in the room, and stumbled forward. "Amelia, out the window, now!" Finn screamed, swinging the poker again, catching Dingus across the shoulder. Amelia didn't hesitate. She threw herself backward through the shattered glass frame, tumbling out onto the muddy, rain-soaked roof of the porch below. The drop was brutal. She landed hard on her shoulder, a sickening flare of white-hot pain shooting down her arm, but she forced herself up. Above her, a horrific roar echoed from the broken window. Finn stood his ground in the bedroom doorway, panting heavily, raising the blood-stained poker one last time. "You're just a fucking trick," Finn spat, tears streaming down his face. "You're nothing." Dingus tilted his massive, distorted head sideways at an impossible 90-degree angle. The party blower extended from his mouth, unspooling fully with a long, wet honk. "The show must go on," Dingus whispered in Ash's voice, before lunging forward with blinding speed. Amelia scrambled down the slippery roof tiles, sliding the last 10 feet and crashing heavily into the mud below. She didn't look back. She ran blindly into the freezing, torrential downpour, the dark woods swallowing her up. Behind her, muffled by the howling wind and the drumming rain, a single sharp, triumphant honk echoed from the second-story window, followed by the sound of applause, slow, heavy, and wet. Amelia hit the tree line, with her lungs burning like swallowed coals, the freezing rain plastering her blood-soaked hair to her forehead. Every step through the knee-high brush felt like running through wet concrete, but the sound of heavy, squelching footsteps behind her kept her moving. Thump, thump, honk. Dingus wasn't far behind. The creature crashed through the saplings and briars, snapping thick oak branches like toothpicks, completely unfazed by the storm or the jagged thorns tearing into Ash's stretched flesh. Amelia's boot caught on a slick root, sending her crashing hard into the mud. She screamed as a sharp rock gouged deep into her already bruised forearm, warm blood instantly mixing with the rain. She tried to scramble up, but a massive shadow-casting bulk loomed directly over her. Going somewhere before the main act? Ash's face, trapped beneath the melting porcelain mask, twisted into a grotesque imitation of a pout. The razor-sharp party blower unspooled from his maw, hovering inches from Amelia's face, ticking rhythmically with a sickening clack-clack. Amelia rolled over onto her back, kicking out wildly with her boots. Her heel caught Dingus squarely in his bulbous, prosthetic red nose. The nose squelched loudly, not like rubber, but like a pressurized blister popping. Black, viscous fluid sprayed outward, smelling intensely of rotting carnations and old copper. Dingus shrieked, a sound that vibrated right through the wet earth and made Amelia's teeth ache. The creature clutched its face, its massive blood-slicked fingers digging into the cracked ceramic mask, trying to tear it away, only to pull strips of raw, weeping human skin along with it. "My face! You ruined the makeup!" Dingus roared, his voice shifting violently between a helium-pitched toddler's whine and a grinding industrial gear. Seizing the microsecond of disorientation, Amelia scrambled backward on her elbows, kicking frantically against the mud until her spine hit the thick trunk of an old-growth pine. From the darkness behind the tree line, a sudden, breathless gasp cut through the storm. "Amelia!" It was Finn. He was staggering through the downpour, his shirt shredded, clutching his ribs where Dingus had backhanded him earlier. In his hand, he still gripped the heavy iron fireplace poker, its tip dripping with a dark mixture of rain and gore. Finn didn't hesitate. With a feral roar, born of pure terror and adrenaline, he sprinted past Amelia and slammed the iron poker directly into the back of Dingus's knee joint, right where he had cracked it earlier. This time, the bone didn't just bend, it shattered entirely. A loud, wet crack echoed through the woods as Dingus's leg buckled inward at a sickening right angle. The towering monster dropped heavily to one knee, letting out an ear-splitting, metallic shriek of rage. "Now, Amelia, run!" Finn screamed, swinging the poker back like a baseball bat and driving it straight into the side of Dingus's head, shattering the remaining porcelain mask into a million sharp, flying shards. Underneath the broken ceramic, Ash's face was exposed, or what was left of it. His eyes were completely milked over, bulging from their sockets, his skin stretched paper-thin and painted with dripping grease paint that washed away in streaks under the relentless rain. Dingus didn't stay down. With unnatural speed, despite the shattered knee, the entity lashed out with a backhand blow fueled by supernatural fury. Finn tried to duck, but the massive clawed hand caught him squarely across the chest. The impact sounded like a butcher's cleaver hitting a side of beef. Finn flew backward through the air, hitting a mossy boulder with a sickening crunch before collapsing limply into the mud, the fireplace poker slipping from his nerveless fingers. "Finn!" Amelia screamed, her voice tearing raw. She looked down. Lying half-buried in the mud right beside her hand was the heavy metal poker Finn had dropped. Dingus dragged himself forward, using his massive arms like a gorilla, his shattered leg trailing behind him like a useless piece of meat. The wet, rhythmic squeak honk of his party blower echoed with every agonizingly close inch he gained. "No more encores," Amelia whispered. She didn't wait to think. She lunged forward, grabbing the iron poker with both hands, adrenaline surging through her veins with such intensity that she barely felt the pain in her injured shoulder. As Dingus reached out with long, yellow-nailed fingers to grab her throat, Amelia swung the poker with every ounce of strength she had left. She drove the iron point straight upward, right through the gaping, smiling slit of the creature's painted mouth. The poker punched through the back of the throat with a wet, tearing crunch of cartilage and bone. Dingus froze. The manic children's laughter cut off instantly, replaced by a low, rattling gurgle. Black, thick fluid bubbled violently from the corners of the creature's mouth, mixing with the melting grease paint. The towering, bloated mass of Ash's body began to deflate, the supernatural tension snapping like a guitar string pulled too tight. With a heavy, earth-shaking thud, the monster collapsed face-first into the mud, pinning the lower half of its ruined body against the ground. Silence fell over the clearing, save for the heavy drumming of the rain and the howling wind through the pines. Amelia stood over the twitching corpse, chest heaving, her hands slick with blood and iron. She stared down at the motionless form for a long, agonizing moment, waiting for it to move, waiting for another laugh, another honk. Dropping the bloody poker into the mud, Amelia turned away and broke into a desperate run toward the faint glow of the highway lights in the distance, leaving the Miller property and Dingus the Clown far behind in the dark. The rain had finally slowed to a persistent, heavy mist by the time the flashing red and blue lights of the state troopers lit up the shoulder of Route 9. Amelia sat wrapped in a silver emergency foil blanket on the back bumper of an ambulance, her hands still faintly trembling as a paramedic shone a penlight into her eyes. She hadn't spoken a word since she flagged down a semi-truck 3 miles down the highway. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the wet, mechanical honk echoing in the dark. 2 county cruisers and a crime scene van had trundled up the overgrown logging trail toward the Miller property an hour ago. Amelia watched the distant tree line, waiting for the inevitable radio chatter from the deputies, pushing through the briars. Deep in the woods, inside the rotting husk of the second-floor bedroom, the heavy iron-banded trunk lay open and empty. A quarter-mile away, where the rain had washed away the crimson-tinted mud, a lone, oversized yellow clown shoe sat neatly planted in the damp earth. Beside it, half buried under a carpet of rotting pine needles, a single, rusted party blower twitched once. A soft, mechanical hiss cut through the quiet night air, followed by a low, muffled giggle that faded slowly into the wind.